Welcome back to 8 Spotlight, the podcast brought to you by 8 Capital, where we go startup by startup, founder by founder, and bring you the stories behind our portfolio. Today, we're joined by Wayne Crosby, founder and CEO of OrgOrg, a company rethinking how organizations actually operate. Now, Wayne is no stranger to building category-defining products. He previously founded Zentor, which became Google Slides, spent a decade at Google helping build G Suite and other major products, and later founded Humu, focused on making work better through behavioral science. Now, with OrgOrg, he's tackling a problem most companies just accept: the chaos of running an organization across dozens of disconnected tools. OrgOrg is building an organizational productivity suite, a unified platform that replaces fragmented internal tools with one system designed to help teams operate, collaborate, and scale more effectively. Let's get into it. Wayne, so happy to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. That was a great intro. Thank you so much.
Of course, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. So you've built companies across multiple eras of software. What has stayed the same through building and what has changed?
Oh, that's a great question because, as you mentioned, I've been doing this for a long time. So I'm 25 years in the industry of building companies, and it's been just incredible to see the change of what's happened. Even from the time that I started OrgOrg to the time that it is now, when I started, it was AI was just starting to come onto the scene, and I was still writing every line of code and maybe using it to help do a little bit of, help with challenging bugs that may crop up. And fast forward to today, and there's no more really writing software per se. You have to have like a systems understanding and be able to prompt the LLMs to move forward. But it's just been an incredible journey from, you know, the original kind of assembly level classes that I took in college all the way to being able to use natural language to build software to help people. And as you mentioned, I think so that's like the biggest change is just like how you do it and where you get stuck. You no longer get stuck in all of when we started Zentor, we had these problems of, how do you draw fonts on a web page, right? Like this was an unsolved problem at the time. And now, you still don't get stuck on any of these kind of technical details because there's enough knowledge and prior art out there that just like helps you kind of blow through them. That's been by far the biggest change. The thing that stayed the same though is really what drives me on OrgOrg, which is I believe that software and technology has a role to play in fulfilling a basic human need of like wanting to collaborate and work together. It's why I started Zentor back in the day, because I got tired of emailing around PowerPoint presentations and I just thought like collaboration was a better tool and that's what people wanted. And I still believe that's true. I think that there's like this fundamental human desire to want to come together and work and build something that's bigger than what we could build by ourselves. And so that collaboration and that human element of software is still very much the same, no matter kind of what industry you go into. And that's why I keep getting drawn back to this productivity space of just how do you help people find that enjoyment in working together?
After helping build tools used by billions.
Yeah. The last number I saw was about 3 billion users were on G Suite. So it's insane.
My goodness, that's so many. Wow. Well, okay, so you achieved massive success there. So what made you want to go back to building from scratch?
I've always been a builder. I love building from scratch. I love the early stages of innovation are just the most fun in my opinion. I've had big teams and small teams and I just really enjoy kind of working in that creative space of, is this something that people want? Would this actually help? Figuring that out and doing that exploration through ambiguity and just exploration. And so when I left Google in 2016, was, it was a kind of a crazy journey. I can just like talk a little bit about that. When we first got started, Google bought us because they were, looking at how can they expand beyond search. And so Chrome didn't exist, Android didn't exist, like none of these other things existed. Gmail had just come onto the scene. And so they thought, well, maybe we can actually expand out and build a full productivity suite. But the world wasn't quite ready for it. And it took many, many, many years for it to gain adoption. And I remember early on just kind of looking at some of the numbers and being like, wow, many years in, the average number of documents in Google was still like 1 per user. And it took a long time to get the suite to the point where it was capable enough to be able to handle real world situations and and also have people's work habits change enough to realize that collaboration really is this thing that helps you work better. And so uh, it wasn't until about year 7 that I was there that I was like, wow, this is actually going to go, and this is really big, and it's going to be bigger than anything. It's bigger than Microsoft's Office suite, and it's all of these other things. And so that was really exciting. But by the time that it was there, and I had done a bunch of other things at Google too, like my team was responsible for sign in with Google, if anybody's been using that ever. And I did a bunch of stuff on the machine learning front in terms of the early AI elements that have actually come to define what we're doing now with some of the people on my team were the original authors of the Transformer paper that kind of has unlocked a lot of the AI stuff that's today. So it was like an incredible journey, and I loved every minute of it. But by 8-9 years after I had started, it was a very different company, and I had learned how to navigate a lot of bureaucracy, set my teams for success, but I wanted to get back to building. I felt like I could have a bigger impact in the world. I kind of ask myself this question every year, and I still do this to this day, which is, time is precious, and like, where can I have the biggest impact in the world? And for many, many years, it was at Google, because every time we launched anything, it was, it would hit millions of users. And then I got to the point where I was just like, actually, I think my biggest impact is going to be somewhere else. Let me go ahead and jump in to do another startup. And so at that time, I had been working with the CHRO at Google. His name was Laszlo Bock. He had written a New York Times bestseller in terms of like Google culture, and it had Google had a huge halo around how do people work, how do they use data in order to be able to influence the way that people work. And so he and I decided to branch off and go start another company called Humu, as you mentioned. And that was a really fun journey around the behavioral science and the behavioral economics of what is it that motivates us as people in a work environment? How can we influence those things so that both the employee and the employer get the most out of that relationship? And the like science and psychology around that, about how people think and make decisions is like fascinating to me. And we were at the point where predictive technology was still coming on board with AI and machine learning. And so, well, maybe we can start to pick up some signals and start to use a more data-driven approach to help people work better. So we did that for many years, and that was really fun. But then COVID hit, and it got a lot harder, as it did for many companies during that time. And we ended up deciding to sell the company to Perceptix, which is another great company. And I moved on I thought I was going to take a break, but my wife was like, "Yeah, there's no way you're going to be able to sit still." So I was like, "Okay, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the next month, and I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to like sit here on the couch, and I'm going to watch, reruns of my favorite shows." And like that lasted about a week. And she's like, "What were you doing up until 2 a.m. in the morning?" I'm like, "I don't know. I was just like working on a project I had in mind, and here we go again." About that time, Michael Seipel from Y Combinator, he and I had known each other from when I first did Y Combinator back in 2007 with Zentor. And he reached out and said, "Hey, saw you exited. Why don't you come be a partner at Y Combinator for a little bit and a visiting partner and help out with the next generation of founders?" And so I did that for a long time, and I really enjoyed it. But the funny thing that happened was, after I had sold a bunch of the employees, they kind of attrited to other companies, as happens after acquisition. And they started reaching back out to me saying, "Hey, what were those tools that we were using at Hulu? I want to bring them to my new company." And I was like, "Well, those were just things that I built in nights and weekends, and kind of inspired by the lessons that I'd learned at Google and the tools that I'd used at Google, and kind of brought them to Humu and made them more acceptable for smaller companies." So they're like, "Hey, can you build me those?" And I was like, "Sure." Let's like start building again on the nights and weekends to help them out. And pretty quickly we ended up with about 300 orgs on the platform, and without even really trying. And I was like, "Oh, well, maybe there's something here again." And I talked to some of the folks over at Y Combinator, and they're like, "Yeah, sure. This makes perfect sense given your background, and like you kind of, what the answers are here. You should give it a go again." And they convinced me to get started and jump back into the founder mode. So that's what I've been doing for the last year and a half or so.
Here we go again. That's awesome. So, okay, I was going to ask you, like, what did you learn from your previous companies that directly shaped this one? But you just answered that.
It's been this continuous journey of just trying to look at what problems are out there and are unsolved, and what skills I have that can bring to the table to help make the world a little bit better and make work a little bit better for people. And then just experimentation, right? And it's a lot of experimentation in the startup world. You almost never get it right on the first try. And so you have to kind of learn and grind and grow from each of your assumptions that you have that you believe are truths. But then, you launch a product, and the world tells you, actually, you don't understand my problem. And then you've got to learn from it, and you got to grow, and you got to reiterate. right? And I just love that process.
So, where does this passion come from of making work better?
That's a good question. If you had told me when I was in college that like this was the space that I would end up in, I would have told you you're crazy. I would have been like, no, video games or like entertainment. But as I went on in my career, found that like I just was really drawn. There was this moment in time at Google where I was managing a couple of teams, and on paper they were amazing. Like every employee, came from a fantastic background and was able to write amazing code and think really creatively individually. But this one team was just like consistently outperforming this other team. And I got really curious about like, why is that? Why is that actually happening? Because like they should be performing about equally. Like what else is going on besides just the skills and the tools that they're using, right? There's like this other more fundamental thing that's happening. And that's when I really started to get into like the behavioral science aspect of it and the team dynamics and like how is it that like people come together and sometimes they do amazing things and sometimes it's just kind of okay. And sometimes like it's a total disaster, right? Like there's something there that is unsolved and really interesting. And there's more and more research that's going into it, but the psychology of it really got me interested in that. And then as I thought more deeply about it, um, as I kind of moved into, at one point in time in my Google career, I joined this team called the machine intelligence team. It was just getting started. It was early, like I mentioned, early days of AI. Um, I ran into this one researcher and I was like, oh, cool. What are you working on? And he's like, well, I'm working on like thinking about what a world in a post work environment looks like. And I was like, oh, interesting. Why are you doing that? Because like clearly there's a lot to do. And he's like, well, AI is going to be successful. It's clear to me. And this was back in 2012, maybe even earlier. And I was just like, you are crazy. You are way out there, dude. But like you're in a research group. So, okay, fine, go do your research. But as I thought about it more, I had like this existential moment where I was like, do I really want to be a part of a team that potentially contributes to a post work world? Right? I find a lot of satisfaction in the work I do. I find a lot of fulfillment in like helping other people. And so what does this actually mean? And I had a lot of conversations with this guy and he's super thoughtful. And I came to the conclusion that I think that like work is fundamentally human, as I mentioned earlier. I think that like we as human beings are social creatures. We like to come together. We like to like collaborate and build together. And so I think that like at the end of the day, we're going to do this regardless of whether or not they're like, I think the work is going to transform and change dramatically over the next decade. We're already starting to see it, but that like fundamental, like desire to work together doesn't ever go away. And once I realized that it was like intrinsic to being human, to want to work and like whatever shape that takes, that's when I like got really interested in being like, okay, this is a space that I want to really play into and lean into. The productivity suite that I built for G Suite happened to be like an opportunity that I saw. But then as I like dug into it more, I was just like, yes, this is part of being human and we should like, there's nothing more valuable than like helping bring that out and make it easier for people to experience that.
That's really cool.
I know most people think of work as like this thing that they have to do and it kind of sucks. And I think that's true for a lot of people. But I think we've lost sight basically ever since, like, just to get a little philosophical here for a second, ever since the Industrial Revolution, we've been like putting people in smaller and smaller boxes and say, this is your playground, right? And like you become the expert of this thing. But I really think that like takes away from the humanness of what we actually want to do. And so for the first time ever, in my opinion, and certainly in my career, I feel like we're expanding roles as opposed to like putting them into more and more expertise roles because you can have a smaller team now that has, marketing expertise, product expertise, design expertise, sales expertise, all like enabled by agents. And so you're able to get work done in a way that is so empowering and feels amazing because you're not blocked by somebody else. You're not being told if you're on a small team that where everybody has agency, you're not being told, you can't go explore this other place that might be interesting to you. Right. No, you're a software engineer. You write code. You don't, I've been in some places that are like, you don't even talk to the customers. Right. And I think it's just fascinating to me to see the world go through this transformation of like, no, with the power of a lot of these agents and tools, you can do a whole bunch more than what is, typically defined inside of your box. And companies are seeing the value in that for the first time. And I think that's a real unlock for everybody.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you've talked a little bit about how companies rely on dozens of point solutions to run their organizations. Why has software evolved this way, do you think?
Well, that's an interesting one too, because software has typically been hard to build. So if you like, um, I think, well, certainly most engineers are familiar with a company called PagerDuty. It's a company that helps monitor your production systems and then automatically alerts engineers whenever there's issues or whenever it needs to be escalated to somebody to look at a production system. You can page them, and it sets up rotations. And this was a company that was, it came out of Y Combinator back in, I think 2008 or nine or something like that. And at that moment in time, it was like really hard to build software that like interacted with telephone systems and other things and set up schedules, and like Google Calendar didn't really, like, barely existed at that time too. Like there was just like nothing in place in order to be able to support this. And it was really hard. And so they ended up building a multi-billion-dollar public company out of being able to just like connect these systems and make it easier for people to do these things. But because it was hard, they basically like had to stay roughly in their lane about this is the type of product that we build and offer. And that continued over and over and over until literally just a couple of years ago, where it was just impossible. The amount of resources, unless you were a Google or a Meta or one of these giant companies, the amount of resources you needed to build just a single product was staggering. And so the advice that was given over and over from venture capital and startup advice was go narrow, go deep, be the best solution that you can possibly for this individual point-wise solution that you're doing. And that's how you're going to find success. And so that's kind of how the market grew. And it was a best of breeds kind of solution, world where you would pick and choose the different tools that you wanted. And then all of a sudden AI came onto the scene. And again, like the entire software industry has been built up with the premise that the most expensive part of doing software is the engineering part of building. All of a sudden, almost overnight, that was flipped on its head, and that became one of the cheapest parts of the entire product buildings, right? And it was just like the entire world got flipped upside down. And so all of these companies that had spent years and years building a very narrow thing, they're just kind of in a tough spot because they either have to choose to completely change the way that they think and start to expand, or they're going to get consumed by some other company that's coming up that's building a bunch of these other more suite-like solutions. And so that's where the idea of OrgOrg came from, was like, okay, the opportunity is right between and industries constantly go through kind of like bundling and unbundling phases. And it's very clear that we're in a strong bundling phase right now, but it's even different than what we've seen in the past, because even in a bundled solution, a lot of times people would have to take like an 80% product, as opposed to getting the exact thing that they wanted. And now with AI, everybody's like, well, no, I want exactly the thing that I'm looking for. Like 80% is no longer good enough. And so not only are we in like this phase where we're bundling again, but we're also in this like hyper personalized software stack that like has to be tailored specifically to your needs. And that's a new and interesting challenge that's presenting to every company that's running right now.
So, how do you tackle that at OrgOrg, where everybody wants something just slightly different?
Yeah. Well, it's part of that is just the fact that we're able to build so much faster. And so when people are asking for particular things, we're able to accommodate them. The infrastructure on the internet is really good now. So we're able to like spin up new things to be able to support them. And so it's part of this is just speed. In the past, most people have had to say no, and now we can say yes. And so that's been fun. I think the other thing is that if we want to like look a little bit, we've talked a lot about the past, but if we want to look forward a little bit in terms of like what this actually looks like, and we're not quite there yet, but it seems clear to me that this is going to like it's a confusing concept, but bear with me for a second. I think that we're just entering the stage where a web application is becoming like the default document. And so I'll tell this story because I think it's fascinating. As a founder of Google Slides and somebody who's used slide software their entire career, for the first time ever, I was giving a presentation to another group, and I was just like, oh man, mucking with slides is so painful after working with, Claude Code and building all this really cool stuff. I was like, I'm just gonna build an app for my presentation. And it was so much better, so much faster I was able to like create interactive elements, right, as part of a web application experience. And you just like tell it, it's like, cool, I want like a slide format, and here's roughly the story that I want to lay out, and here's kind of the interactive elements I want. And it built me just a phenomenal presentation in a matter of minutes, as opposed to trying to muck around with stylistic elements or alignment or, all of these other things that get in the way of actually um, communicating some idea. And so as we look forward, I think, um, applications are going to become the new document. And you're going to see basically as many applications come into the world as you see documents today, which is kind of like this like weird concept. But they're so dynamic and they're so expressive to be able to tell exactly the story that you want, and so easy to create, that I think that there's this really compelling journey that we're on to be able to communicate better as people. And I think the old productivity suites are pretty broken at this point. And it's going to take a decade for people to get there, but it's absolutely going to happen.
So, do you think of OrgOrg as a productivity suite, or do you think of it like as an internal operating system? How do you classify it in your mind?
Yeah. So we've been trying to talk through the different brandings of this. And one of the ones that I like is that it is an organizational productivity suite. You have your employee productivity suite that is really traditionally has been your docs, sheets, and slides type of stuff. But there's a whole nother layer of tooling that you need in order to run an effective organization. And that's really where OrgOrg comes in, is to fill that gap of between the individual creating these artifacts and the tooling and artifacts that the organization needs as a whole in order to be able to run effectively. And so it's things like, really great employee profile pages and discovery of content, and being able to, share effectively ideas and create, set these goals in a way that are easy to understand and maintain, as opposed to just being like put into a document and never looked at again. There's a bunch of stuff that you just kind of need to support organizations that historically has been pretty bad.
So, what's the most interesting way you've seen someone use OrgOrg?
Oh, that's a good question. So I'd say that like there's a lot of the tooling that we have in place has not been rocket science. It's been, existing kind of these SaaS companies that, or a bunch of companies that have used point-wise solutions before. And then they're just basically adopting our solution because it's as good and cheaper and everything else. So they're like on that front, there hasn't been a ton of innovation. The story is really around bundling, and they just like start with one tool and then they add another and kind of build up from there. But what we're working on right now, and this is, a little bit of a precursor, but um, I just saw a demo from one of our interns yesterday, and I was like, yes, that is it. That is what we're trying to do. He basically just had a spreadsheet of, he runs a club at UC Davis, and it's a club that builds drones to help firefighters in California. It's like a very noble and cool club. And had a spreadsheet of people who he was reaching out to in order to like raise some funding for the club and whatnot. And he started using OrgOrg in our kind of new chat experience, where you basically can create a Slack-like channel, but these things are powered by AI and have kind of their own environment with them. So you can think of them as almost like, they have an open claw associated with the environment. And so he just like uploaded the spreadsheet, and it has as we're talking about, it has an app experience associated with it. So it generated, just from a spreadsheet, it generated a full-on CRM for him. It started to create a marketing campaign for him. And like started doing outreach, and like he gave it access to their email, and it's like started emailing. And it's like, so that these things just start to unlock, productivity on a way that is just like mind-blowingly big, as soon as like one person can just like get all of this stuff up and running. And so that's what the horizon, and that's what the future looks like. And that's what the most exciting thing that I've seen somebody use OrgOrg for, besides like, yes, there's the nuts and bolts of just like, how do you run a company? And we know how to do this, but we just like have had terrible software up to this point. So like, yes, we'll fix all of that, but also the future is super exciting.
That's really cool. That's really cool. The fact that it just created a marketing campaign
Right.
isn't.
Right. It went out and like enriched the data, and then like, started to, and he's already raised, something like $50,000 from this thing. And it's like
Oh
to
my
on
goodness.
the drones and firefighting. It's like, great. So
Incredible.
we'll see. We'll see what happens.
So, is there a strategy that you have for adding what used to be a different SaaS product, but now is within your suite? Or is it just kind of like what you hear the most from people you end up doing?
So I think there's two things. I think there's like I've run a lot of teams for a lot of years, and so I have a strong opinion about like the tooling that you need in order to run effective teams. And so a lot of the answers were known, and we spent the majority of the first year just kind of building out the known. Like, okay, we definitely need all of this stuff together. And then there's definitely another layer of as customers are asking for things, we're continuing to iterate and add those things into as they make sense. And then I think that like we're at the point where the suite is pretty robust. And we're like, okay, what's now? And the software industry is at this really interesting stage where I think there are no more moats in B2B software. And so you have to like think a little bit more about like, okay, why do people want to use this? Is it the build versus buy equation has like, it's almost all build now, whereas it used to be buy. And so from a strategic perspective, as a software company, I think you need to be looking at that and thinking through, okay, what is the value that I'm actually bringing? What expertise can I actually start to put into this software that's actually more valuable than the building of the software itself? And so as we think through that, that's really where a lot of um, our strategy around kind of these new environments on how do you create and collaborate and actually run much bigger initiatives with much smaller teams than you've ever been able to do and make it easy and accessible for people. At the end of the day, I think that the the average size of company that exists is going to like shrink dramatically. There, of course, you're going to have the big behemoths, but you're also like you're going to see them reduce their workforce, and it's going to be harder for lots of people to like go find more work because everybody's going to be reducing workforce, unfortunately. And what that's going to end up driving is people going, "Wait, I have this idea. I've had this idea for a long time. Let me go ahead and it's easier than ever to build this stuff. Let me go ahead and build it." But capital is always tricky, especially when you're getting started in order to get. And so you're going to have to do with less, but the tooling helps augment that. And so you're going to just see over the next decade a kind of a Cambrian explosion of startups that come into existence of it's like every different type that you could possibly imagine, and they're all going to be able to do really amazing things with a lot less, and they're going to stay smaller over the long run. Whereas historically, you would see some of these like turn into giant companies as well. And so I think the future of work are these really small teams. And so as we look at the strategy of, where are companies going and what are they doing, it's a lot of tooling around how can you just like make the 10-person unicorn, right? Because there's been a lot of conversation in Silicon Valley around like the 1-person unicorn. And like, sure, that's like a fun thought exercise, but that ignores my fundamental premise that work is human and we want to collaborate and we want to work. I think the ideal size, and I think hopefully most people have felt this at some point in their career, where they're on this like small team where they get along with people, they have a shared goal and a shared vision, and they're like driving towards something that's meaningful. And then that usually starts to break down like once you get past 10-ish people, in my experience, right? It's like, yeah, Amazon coined this term long ago in like the early 90s around like the two pizza team. And it's this idea that like, if you can feed an entire team with 2 pizzas, then like that's roughly the right size. And it turns out to be like 8 to 10. But if you have to like start ordering 20 pizzas in order to feed the team, that's no longer like, it doesn't feel very good. It feels like you're like getting bogged down with bureaucracy and like you're spending too much time in communicating and coordinating as opposed to actually driving towards the goal that you want. And I think there's something to that. Like, there's a lot of things about Amazon culture that we can talk about that I don't necessarily agree with, but that one I 100% agree with, which is that the people like these smaller teams. They want to feel like they have agency and ownership. And right around 10 people, I think is the sweet spot. So I think you're going to see like a ridiculous number of 10-person teams spin up.
You recently launched a screen recording product. What
Yes.
inspired you to enter that space?
Oh, that's a good question. That was so we had a bunch of companies that were using Loom and for internal communication and communication with the customers, and they were tired of paying their monthly bill to Loom, and so they said, hey, this feels like it's a part of like the communicating across the org and like bringing people together and making sure that people were aligned both on our customer success teams and internally. Can you build a screen recording feature for us so we can stop paying our Loom fee? Uh, and so a month later we had a Loom feature, right? Like it's
Wow.
like the rate of software development is just insane, right? And so, and it's baked in with all of the, the permission controls and the security controls and the document management and stuff like that. So that's I think what people are looking for is they're just like they feel like they need all of these things, but they don't want all of these individual solutions, and they don't want all the bills, and they know that software is getting cheaper, and so they're kind of scratching their head, going, "Why am I still paying 2015 fees when and even higher as these companies continue to raise rates when I know that it's actually just getting cheaper and cheaper to build this stuff?"
So, okay, I have a little bit of an annoying question. I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
For teams already using tools like Loom or maybe even just Loom, what makes OrgOrg's version a compelling replacement, if not a better replacement?
Well, there's a couple things there. The price point for OrgOrg is like dirt cheap in comparison because we're able to operate with a small team that is able to produce this stuff, and so we're able to keep our cost structure down in a way that like the old companies cannot. So, but beyond price, because like a lot of companies, like whether or not they're paying for Loom or any of these other solutions or not, isn't really going to be the defining characteristic, and so then there's like a change management piece that has to go into that and the cost associated with change management. And so for those companies, I say, like, not only do we have all of the existing stuff, and the earlier you get on this as your company grows, the easier it is just to kind of like add in more of these products. And it's all bundled underneath one suite fee. So you're not paying any more depending on however much you're using. And we kind of address each stage of the company as you grow, you're going to need different types of tooling. And so we're kind of there with you as you grow. But also, like, we're operating as a modern kind of one of these modern 10-person AI driven companies where we're going to be able to iterate. We're going to be able to kind of push forward, and you're not going to be stuck in the legacy of, what were these solutions in the past. And we're kind of rethinking, how do you actually build these AI first companies
Yeah.
and the tool chain that you need in order to be able to do that. So if you're looking for what your AI strategy is and the tools that you're going to need in order to be able to bring your company forward, that's where we come in.
So, what does a more streamlined internal workflow actually look like with OrgOrg in place?
Yeah. So I was just talking about some of this stuff where in the ideal world, you have a collaborative space where people are working on, go to market or product or whatever it is. And then there's a shared agent where that's like helping facilitate the tasks that are associated with that. And so humans are still very much in control. They're very much like they see the vision, they see the strategy, they're trying to push forward. And then OrgOrg is there to like basically connect all of the dots and the power of what technology brings to the table to help make it easy for you. I mean, we talked about like taking a spreadsheet and just turning it into a CRM and whatnot. Like that's what streamlined experiences look like. That's what people want. At the end of the day, is they want exactly their solution. Like a spreadsheet is great. It's like very multi-purpose. It does lots of things, but we talk about like the level of customization and the exactness of like, I just want this thing for my specific need. And that's never been able to be done before without like extreme cost. And so like just being able to get the details right for your specific need is really what starts to unlock a lot of that streamlined experience.
That's hard to even imagine that that's even possible. But
I simplify it down this way. I sort of like imagine a world where you have zero setting screens and zero admin screens, right? Like you no longer have to like flip toggles or do anything. You just tell the app what you want, and it turns into it morphs into the thing that you're actually needing. Right. And so there's no more like hard constraints around what it's more like, it's more like molding in clay as opposed to, concrete. Right. And so you get close, you get like 90% of the thing that you want. And then like, if you want a little tweak here or there, you just tell it what you want. And it like makes the small, like minor adjustments in order to like suit your needs.
so,
It's an exciting time.
yeah, it sounds like I'm going to go and see what I can do on this. So, okay, you've said more is on the way. What can users expect next from OrgOrg?
Well, a lot of the cool stuff that I've been talking about is under development right now. It's a little bit raw. And so we have it released to a few beta testers. And I expect over the summertime here in the next, 5 months or so, we're going to be rolling out this in a more productionized experience. If it's going to hopefully just like feel great on getting stuff done. It's going to feel effortless. You're going to have ideas. You're going to be able to turn them into action. You're going to be able to like drive change. So that's the goal, is like by summertime, we have like a pretty nice platform that people are all building on top of and using internally in order to be able to get stuff done.
Very cool. So, do you see a future where companies rely on a single platform for all internal operations like OrgOrg?
Yes, I think that's possible. I think like a lot of this stuff is actually, I think one of the things that is going to be really interesting as it evolves is like which models do you use for which things? And so while you may use a common platform in order to be able to get something done, I do think that there's going to be continued iteration on like which models are best for which tasks. If you're trying to do something with image generation, Nano Banana is the great model right now, but tomorrow it's not going to be. So, or maybe it is for some companies, but not for others. And so I think uh, while like I said, the interface that employees and people are using in order to get work done, those we may be able to create a common platform for that. I think the models that are powering those underneath are going to be in flux for a very long time. And you need to allow for people to be able to choose which one actually suits their needs.
Yeah, I can totally see that. So, what does success look like for OrgOrg?
Good question. I think that like I'm in the fortunate enough position where I've had several successful startups. And so success for me looks a little bit different. I'll tell you that when the moment that I felt like I succeeded with G Suite and Google Workspace was my son, it had nothing to do with work. My son had started kindergarten at our local public school. And I went to, the first orientation day, and the principal stands up on stage and says, she didn't know I was in the audience, obviously, but she said, we're switching to Google Workspace this year. We ran an experiment last year where we tried it and the kids liked it better. The teachers liked it better. The collaboration was better. And the output that the kids generated was better. And so we're just switching this year. And I was like, whoa, I like totally changed the way my kids are going to experience school.
Wow.
Mm. And so I kind of hope on like a similar, I got an 18-year-old now. I just got accepted to college and accepted. So he's going to be heading off next year. And so I'm hoping in the next 4 years, I can build a platform that a similar thing happens when he enters into the workforce. And he's like, you have completely changed the way that I work and the way that I'm experiencing work. And so that's what success looks like for me if I can pull it off. That's a big, tall order, but I think we can get there.
A tall order, but a very noble one. I think that's really sweet. Also,
Thanks.
congrats to your son. Okay, well, I mean, that's all I have for today. Is there anything that I missed that you still want to speak on?
That's it. It was awesome talking to you and I had a great time.
Yeah, me too. I had a awesome, like really wonderful time. Wayne, this was such a great conversation. OrgOrg is tackling a problem every company feels: too many tools, too much fragmentation, and rethinking what it looks like to run an organization with a truly unified system. I'm excited to see how this platform continues to grow. I'm going to play around with it. You have me really excited for this.
Good. I will, yeah. If anybody's interested in the new tooling and wants to try some of the stuff out, just hit me up directly. I'm just Wayne at orgorg.com, and I'm happy to like unlock some of the features for beta users and whatnot. We manage all of our own customer success at this point, and it's been super fun, and we've been able to scale that. And so hit me up.
Okay, you heard it here first. To everyone listening, we'll be back soon with more founders, more products, and more behind the scenes conversations. Thanks for tuning in.
All right. Thanks.